Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the Faith, Tech, and Space podcast. I'm your host, Rich Hay from WindowsObserver.com. Good to be with you today, the 29th of March, 2020. We are almost at the end of the third month of the year already, and what a different place we're in today compared to where we were just 3 weeks ago last time I sat down and recorded an episode of the podcast. Things have changed a lot in the world. Our perspectives have changed. The situations have changed with the response to the COVID-19 coronavirus and all that is doing, which started out in the Far East and then Europe and now here in North America and other places, globally, really globally. And we're all kind of dealing with that. You can watch on social media as people are reacting to it and things that are happening on the front lines with the healthcare workers anywhere and everywhere, as well as just people kind of coping with the extra anxiety that this is introducing into their lives. So all of that goes along with changes that have been made, right? So there's so many places in the world and even within our own country here in the United States that are on lockdown, right? People are being told, stay in your home, don't go out for anything. There are some limitations on that. They can go out for certain types of critical things. But for the most part, people are being told to be locked down. I know it happened in the United Kingdom. So where I have family, we have family in Italy. They're under lockdown. They've been in lockdown for a long time. We have one member of the family who lives up in the northern part of Italy, and we have another that lives in the central south part of Italy around Naples. So one up around Aviano, one around Naples. Then we have family on my wife's side of the family that is from the United Kingdom, from the London area, the greater London area, and other areas of the UK. So they're in a lockdown now. And then here we're in Florida. My wife and I actually decided a few weeks ago that we would enter into our own kind of forced lockdown, not that it's 100% lockdown per se, but because my wife is in that age range, we're being protective of her health. I go out and do the shopping. We've adopted a regimen of keeping things very clean, and when we're in and out of the house and things like that. So we're doing everything we can to not have any issues. But it's different now, right? The lockdown. So many people are working from home. I work from home normally. I mean, I've been working from home in every job I've had except for my Best Buy gig, which was about 9 months. After I retired almost 9 years ago, has been work from home stuff, whether it been tech support or it has been as a freelancer and now as an employee of Informa UK as a content creator. So there's a lot of folks working from home now that never worked from home before. And we're going to talk a little bit later about the impact that is having not only on individuals, but the companies that give us those services. And I'm mainly going to focus on Microsoft. That's kind of who I am. So that's who I pay the most attention to. But we're going to talk about those things because it has changed a tremendous amount of things, right? Things have changed so much in just the last few weeks here in the United States. And it's in a rapidly evolving situation as well. And of course, I'm going to mention this a little bit later, but my advice to you right now is you get your information from scientists and doctors, reputable doctors that have their reputations are built on solid work, solid science. That's going to be the best for your anxiety and the best for your kind of keeping up with this kind of stuff because it's hard to do. It's hard to stay away from the sensationalism that can occur. The numbers are daunting and the numbers are going to get more daunting, but you have to kind of stay focused and aware of a good source and then stick with that source, okay? So as we always do, we're going to start with the faith part of this podcast. This is always the lead subject area of the podcast. And I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the last 3 weeks around faith when it comes to the coronavirus stuff. And I have to start in Rome. I have to start at the Vatican. Now, most of you know, I think I've been upfront about this, that I'm Catholic. I'm a Catholic convert. I converted to the Catholic faith back in 1987. And so when I speak of faith, I'm speaking from generally the perspective of being a Catholic Christian. That's what the big C, not the little c. Little c Catholic means kind of universal church. But from the big C Catholic, that is my faith. That's where I profess my faith at. And so when I speak of faith, I speak from that perspective. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened on, I believe it was Friday, the Pope Francis in St. Peter's Square gave the world an Urbi et Orbi. It means the city and the world blessing. Normally, these are only given one shortly after a pope is elected to office or at Christmas and Easter. So it was very unique and not the norm for him to choose to do this. And it was specifically addressing around the coronavirus issue. So the way the Urbi et Orbi runs, it takes about an hour. So there's an opening prayer by the Pope. Then there is the reading of the gospel. And in fact, the gospel they read in this one on Friday was Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. And then they did exposition, which is where the Holy Communion, the host, which we believe and it is the body and blood of Christ, the body, soul, and divinity of Christ, was put on. There was adoration and exposition, and then the Pope gave his Urbi et Orbi blessing using the monstrance, which held the consecrated host, and he stood at the portal looking out on rainy St. Peter's Square in the city of Rome and the world, and gave his blessing using the monstrance with the holy holy body of Christ in it on display. So it is I've got a couple links here for you to get some background, right? First off, a summary of what he spoke about, because after the gospel, he gave a kind of a reflection. It's not a homily because it's not as part of the Mass, but it was a reflection, and his focus was on Mark chapter 4, 35 through 41. So I've got links about there and why he talked about the cross is our hope, and then I also gave you the translation of his reflection that he gave there in St. Peter's Square. So the story of Mark chapter 4, 35 through 41 is called the calming of a storm at sea. And what's going on is, and I'm going to read you this Bible passage, and because it will basically tell the story, and then I'll talk about what Pope Francis focused on in his reflection. But it says, "On that day, as evening drew on, he said to them, 'Let us cross to the other side.' Leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. A violent squall came up, and waves were breaking over the boat, so that it was already filling up. Jesus was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. They woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?' He woke up, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, 'Quiet, be still.' The wind ceased, and there was great calm. Then he asked them, 'Why are you terrified? Do you not yet have faith?' They were filled with great awe and said to one another, 'Who then is this, whom even the wind and sea obey?'" So that was the verse, the gospel that he focused his reflection on. And, there he is standing under this temporary stage with a cover in the rain of St. Peter's Square. It was past 6 o'clock in the evening in Rome, so it was dark, or getting dark. And his theme was, "Why are you afraid? Have you no faith?" And it was the comment, he mentioned it many times during his reflection. And the reason is he was encouraging the faithful to, this coronavirus situation is scary. Everybody's doing, many people are doing what they can to stay safe and stay healthy. Some aren't. Some are making their choices there. But it's a scary thing, right? And we know that based on the science and what we're hearing from the doctors is that it's different than the flu because of the way it spreads, its aggressiveness. And although the flu does cause more deaths in the course of a year, this virus's impact is much quicker, right? So he's talking about, why are you afraid? Have you no faith? So he was encouraging the Christian faithful to have faith. This too shall pass is another phrase from the Bible, and that's what he was encouraging people about. Now, as he finished up his reflection, you then would have seen him process from this covered stage towards the entry door to the Vatican, and there were two objects that were there. One was the miraculous crucifix from the Church of St. Marcellus. Now, in May of 1519, there was a fire in that church that destroyed everything, and this what they call the miraculous crucifix was the only thing left from that fire. So then 3 years later, Rome is dealing with the Black Plague. And from August 4th to 20th, for 16 days in 1522, they processed through Rome with the miraculous crucifix. And by the time they finished that 16-day procession, the Black Plague was gone from Rome. And in fact, what they do is about once every 50 years, they reenact that procession around Rome, and the back of the crucifix on the wood It is engraved with the name of the Pope who witnessed that procession. And the last time that crucifix made such a procession was when John Paul II was the Pope. So I've got a link here to a story about the miraculous crucifix so you can learn a little bit more about it and its role that was there. So it was there for veneration. There was also a Byzantine icon of Mary. It's called the Salus Populi Romani. It means roughly the health of the Roman people. And so the Pope also spent time in reflection and veneration of this, what we call an icon, right? That's a picture of Mary, our Mother Mary. So this one had significance because in 593, Pope Gregory I, they processed that icon through Rome in 593, and it brought about an end to the plague that was known as Black Death. So both of these things that were there during this Urbi et Orbi blessing, the city and the world blessing, were tied to and related to times in history that were dealt with a viral plague-like infections, kind of like the coronavirus, the COVID-19 coronavirus. So just interesting that those connections were there. And again, I think history and the historical significance of that is not by accident by any means whatsoever. And in fact, just a couple weeks ago, Pope Francis made a walking prayer pilgrimage to go see the icon of Mary as Salus Populi Romani, the health of the Roman people. And then he prayed a prayer in front of her that he's asked the church to pray on a regular basis for the COVID-19 virus, those fighting it, those treating people, those helping people, those who have died. So that's kind of that's why Friday, this Urbi et Orbi blessing to the city and the world, a blessing, was such a significant event because one, it's not something that's done every day or it's only done Easter and Christmas normally, and then after a pope is elected. It's one of the first kind of things they do as a new pope. So it's not something that's standard. It's not something that's normal. So to have Pope Francis choose to do that, I think, was a very important step for the universal church. That is everyone, as well as, of course, the Catholic Church as well. So I hope that helps you guys with a little bit of understanding, how faith plays a role in that, and plays a role for me, particularly in my faith as a Catholic as well. All right, so moving on about formation, and of course with all this stuff going on with the COVID-19 coronavirus, that has impacted our formation. Unfortunately, we're supposed to have a local class in 2 weeks from yesterday. Oh, no, I'm sorry, no, next Saturday, this coming Saturday, April 4th, we were supposed to be going down to St. Augustine to visit the shrine of Our Lady of La Leche. We had just had a church history class with our teacher a couple weeks ago. Actually, one of our cohort could not be present, so they actually, because they may have potentially been exposed to someone with coronavirus, but they were on webcam, joined in the class. But we were supposed to go tour this shrine and spend a day in St. Augustine together as a cohort. The circumstances are such that we can't do that right now, so we're actually going to do. We're going to meet via Zoom and do Liturgy of the Hours virtually. So we're going to share morning and evening prayer that day together as we would normally as a class when we're in class. So locally, we're working on a paper about church history here in Florida. And in fact, our assignment was we have to write about the history of our parish church. And so I mentioned this to our parish priest, and he has provided me a beautifully done book of the history of the church. And from its original church when it was founded back in the mid-1800s all the way up until now. So it's going to be pretty neat to write that paper this coming week and get that ready to turn in to wrap up my church history class. Online-wise, we are finishing up our sacramental theology class. And in fact, because this coming Sunday is Palm Sunday, a week from today, and then a week later is Easter, so you have what we call Holy Week, which involves the Easter Triduum, which is Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and then the Easter Vigil, and of course Easter on Sunday day. So we have that week coming up, and then the week after Easter is called Easter week, right? It's the beginning of you actually have a period of a week, 8 days there where you start the Easter octave, and then you move into and that goes all the way until Pentecost, which is where Christ returns to his Father in heaven. So we right now are online streaming our masses. So the one paper I have due for my online class for sacramental theology is due in about 3 weeks. And in fact, I've decided after our latest video lecture we had with the instructor, I'm going to write about how community plays a role in all the sacraments of the Catholic Church. 7 sacraments, which we talked about before. And I'm going to write about how those sacraments involve the community, how the community of the church is such an important part of that. So that is going to be my paper that I'm going to be working on. And then, of course, I'm still finishing my canon law homework. I've done all the research. I just got to translate it into a document, and that is due next week as well. So the time at home has turned into, you always look for a silver lining with things, and it's a tough time in the world, but having the time to be able to work on this stuff is really a blessing, to be able to work on the work and get it all done. So that's where we stand locally. That's where we stand online. That's where we are kind of at. I have been helping for a week. I'm very blessed to be able to help my pastor live stream the masses from our parish. Now, there's a lot of people out there that have written headlines to the effect that masses are canceled or something to that effect. And what's actually happened is the public masses have been suspended, but masses are still occurring every day in every parish throughout the world, throughout the Catholic Church. I've been blessed to be able to have an opportunity to help my pastor live stream our masses via Facebook Live to our parishioners and anybody else that happens to see the link and go to look at the Facebook Live. It's been an interesting journey because we started with an iPhone 6, quite an older piece of technology. I had some challenges with sideways videos. So what I learned was, on an iPhone, if you have the display view set to zoomed, it will not let you broadcast Facebook Live landscape. You have to turn that to standard, turn it off. And all the display view zoom does is make the icons and text larger, okay? So you have to turn that off, and then you can stream in landscape mode. This is not an issue on an Android. And in fact, the first 3 or 4 days we did use the iPhone 6 as the way to stream. We have since switched over to using my McLaren 7T Pro 5G, and that is allowing us to stream. Facebook has locked things down pretty tight. There are not a lot of high definition and things like that are backed down because they're trying to save bandwidth. But the one thing that Facebook did do is, because of the prevalency of people starting to stream stuff like this on Facebook, is you no longer have to have an account to watch streaming videos or Facebook Live. So that's a good plus. And I got a link here to a story that was recently written about how different parishes have stepped up their social media effort, posting masses online, because once we Facebook Live and live stream a mass, people can come back later in the day and watch it. And then we have something that's called an act of spiritual communion, a simple prayer that talks about not being able to receive the sacrament of, not be able to receive communion and to receive what's called a spiritual. And so it's a prayer that reflects on it. So that's what we're able to do, and it's a real blessing to see the feedback to this, because what I've discussed with my pastor and a couple others is being able to share our masses. So the masses that occur at my parish, Sacred Heart Catholic Church, Fleming Island, Florida. The ability to be able to share those masses to our parishioners and everybody else that tunes into it or finds it is a real blessing, because it's familiar to them. There's plenty of options online, don't get me wrong, about stream a mass, stream daily masses, Sunday masses, and things like that. But there's a certain special aspect of the community that's involved when you see your priest, your pastor, celebrating the celebrating mass, celebrating the sacrament of. I'm drawing a blank here. Not Holy Communion. It's the sacrament of the Mass, right? Celebrating the Mass, and then. So those people are together in the Facebook Live. They're able to bless each other and to share peace with each other. And it's just been a real blessing to be able to see folks be able to remain connected to the sacrament without being able to be physically present for the sacrament. So it's a real plus. And like I said, there's plenty out there that you could find on TV or online. But this personal part of it, this ability to bring them their parish and their familiar view of the altar and sanctuary is just a real blessing. So that's where we stand on the faith part of things. Thanks for letting me have a chance to share about that with you all. All right, let's jump into the tech stuff, right? We do have a little bit of tech going on. The world has not stopped revolving. Things continue to happen. In fact, tech is playing a huge role in what's going on right now with the coronavirus, because of the fact that working from home has become almost a norm for most people that can do it. There are some jobs that can't, and God bless those folks that are out there on the front lines, keeping the grocery shelves stocked, giving us the ability to go shop for essentials that we need and all of those kind of things. Keeping services running like community services like trash and recycle and all those things. So those folks have still got to be out there, but a lot of folks are working from home. And in fact, I think the number that Microsoft shared was somewhere in the ballpark of 50,000 employees in the Puget Sound area started working from home about 3 weeks ago. All right, but before we get there, let's jump in and talk a little bit about Windows Insider, right? So over the last few weeks, we've had 3 builds, one each week. That's kind of about the norm. We've had build 19582, 19587, and 19592 just recently, just this past week. Not a lot of new features in there, a couple little tweaks here and there, but this is Windows 10 vNext, right? This is the branch, the RS pre-release branch that they will eventually branch off to start to create 20H2 sometime, I would assume, late spring, because we're waiting on 20H1 release, which is Windows 10 version 2004 that will be released, I think, personally, in April, just like past releases. I'm not expecting that to change. Now, Microsoft did change one thing, right? They did extend, I think it was 1709, Windows 10 version 1709, they extended it for 6 more months because it was about to expire in this cycle in April, May. So they have extended that for 6 months for companies that have their folks on there and allow them to stay put on that for a while all this working from home stuff is going on. When it comes to Windows 10 20H1, i.e. version 2004, there are a couple slow ring builds. They continue to service that build. So 19041 is the base build for Windows 10 version 2004, or as we know in development, 20H1. That each month it gets a cumulative update servicing, just like what production versions of Windows 10 gets to fix security issues and things of that nature. So that has been kind of cooking since December timeframe when this went on to slow ring. So it has had a good steady 3 months worth of kind of stability, getting cumulative updates and getting to go right. And I actually today installed that build on my main desktop. Now, the other thing I want to mention here is that I do believe that's going to come out in April. We haven't heard any indication they're going to not do that. But one thing Microsoft did do is they have dropped off doing what they call their optional updates each month. So that, we get a mandatory Patch Tuesday update, right? That's security driven. We're still going to get those. We're still getting those during this coronavirus. But the third and fourth updates that normally come out, they call them week C or update C and update D. That's week 3 and week 4 of the month. They have decided to hold off on those for right now. They aren't critical. That stuff will probably get rolled into a future update. So that's where we stand, right? Windows 10 vNext kind of motoring along, new build a week, no new features, but I don't expect us to see a lot of new features in vNext until after 20H1 is out. Then you have 20H1 been cooking very slowly, monthly updates, getting that stable process in place. Think that's going to hit in April, so we're going to watch for that as well. And then on the Windows 10 X front, right, the emulator came out, I don't know, but I guess that's been 4 or 5 weeks. They did release an updated image for that, build 19578. So that is Windows 10 X that's available if you're running the emulator. I can also tell you the emulator still doesn't run on AMD, so I can't give it access to my 6-core 32 gigabyte system, but I am running it on an i5 with 16 gig of RAM to at least access it when I need to access to take a look at. And then the other big news that came out of our Insider program was the fact that a new lead has been announced for the Insider program. So Donna's relief, Donna Sakar, her relief was officially announced this past week by Panos Panay. Now, remember, Panos Panay is the new head of Windows, period. Software, hardware, at all of it. He's in charge of it. So he announced the new lead. Her name is, Amanda Langowski. She's on Twitter. You can find her link on Twitter. She has been at Microsoft for 20 years. She's been working in Windows for that long. She has been already working in flighting for Windows 10 Insider builds, so she's very familiar with the process. We've actually seen her on a couple of Insider webcasts, right, that they do every once in a while or every month or so. We've seen her on a couple of those to talk about flighting. I got to attend the Microsoft MVP Summit virtually last week. She actually presented a session to us there too. So she's familiar with the content. She might not be a familiar face to all of us, not in the same way that Donna or Gay Ball before Donna was, but Amanda is that new person. And in fact, she mentioned in a tweet that she will do most of her interaction with people on social media through the Windows Insider Twitter account. So that's at Windows Insider, where you'll see most of what she's communicating and sharing with the community and engaging. All right, so that's where we stand. I already mentioned Windows 10 version 2004. I think that's going to land in April. I think that's just a couple weeks away. Look at Patch Tuesday timeframe in April. I don't see any reason why Microsoft would delay that rollout. It's been cooking and baking for a few months, really steady, nothing new, just cumulative updates, watching it behave, and then I think it will come out as scheduled, as expected. They certainly haven't announced anything different. All right, moving on to Edge Insider stuff, right? We're working 4 channels. Edge Canary, its latest build is 83.0.467.0. Edge Dev is also in version 83.0.461.1. So we're in version 83 on both the Canary channel and the developer channel for Microsoft Edge. In the Edge Beta channel, we're still in version 81.0.461.1. And then in Edge Stable, we're still back on version 80.0.361.69. Now, Microsoft did come out shortly after all the work from home and all those other changes that occurred as far as working from the coronavirus impact. And they did say, just because Chrome did the same thing on Chromium, they have kind of frozen where they're at in stable channel development. So Microsoft has followed suit. And so stable's going to sit pretty tight. They'll still address any security things that come up. But for right now, they're not going to move new features down the chain until everything kind of returns to whatever normal will be in the future. So that's the status of stable. Still seeing fairly regular daily updates to Canary. Dev seems to still be getting its weekly updates. Haven't seen a new update for Edge in a while, and I could have missed it. Granted, I could have missed it. But I think you're going to see most of your movement in Edge Canary, Edge Developer, and then it will be a slower trickle down to Edge Beta, with Edge Stable setting tight for a while until things kind of get cranked back up. I've got links to the change summary here for the dev channel update this past week to 83.0.461.1. But some of the things that have occurred that you can now find in Edge Canary and Edge Dev, and even one of them in Edge Beta, Extension Sync has gone live for everybody now as of this update to the developer channel. So if you use extensions and you use multiple devices, now your extensions will sync. There's now the option to drag multiple items into collections at once on a web page. There's also Collection Sync is working. So you can sync the collection between your devices. And I got to say, in the last 10 days, sync for favorites and sync for collections seems to have really improved a lot. It doesn't seem as messy. It's not leaving behind residue from other browsers and things like that, or other versions, other channels of Edge. So it seems to be working a lot better. They did link into some new family safety features. They put a link in the settings to the family settings page on the Microsoft account site. So it's not internal to Edge, but it links you to the family safety features for helping to control screen time and things like that, blocking certain websites, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then they also introduced a new feature called Save Multiple Tabs to Collections. So if you've got 3 or 4 tabs open or more, and you want them all in a single collection, you can right-click on any of them and say, save these to a collection. It will let you name it, and they'll be saved into a collection. And of course, that collection will sync to your other channel or devices. So pretty good set of stuff there. What we're still really missing when it comes to Edge, and as far as tools that we're used to in Edge Legacy, one is, let me pull up my profile here, the sync option. Yeah, it's your open tabs, so the ability to sync your open tabs and history. Although I will tell you this, the web activities plugin or Chrome in the Chrome Web Store, Microsoft built a web activities extension that is working well now. So I'm actually syncing my activity from all my Edge channels onto all my devices, so I can actually use that view that brings up all your past history. You can look at your active windows, and you can also take and search what you've searched for before or seen before. So very handy to have those things. But history and open tabs are at the Edge or Canary and Dev level is still what's open and left to be done. And of course, all of these things have still got to make their way down fully to Edge Beta and ultimately to Edge Stable as they get happy with. All right, some other miscellaneous tech let's talk a little bit about. They took a closer look at Xbox Series X and some of the technology behind that. So that dialogue continues to occur. I think what we're going to see is a steady trickle of updated information over the summer leading up to the holiday release of the Xbox Series X. Microsoft Build, you might have heard, the physical event got canceled. and it's been replaced with the virtual event. So I mentioned a minute ago that I attended the virtual MVP Summit because the in-person summit had been canceled. It was a great event. We used Microsoft Teams. A couple odd hiccups, but you know what? I wasn't originally traveling for MVP Summit because of my changes in life with formation and classes and things like that. It was a real blessing to be able to tune into sessions, and I watched 4 sessions a day for 3 days in a row and then 1 session on my last day. And it was great to connect with everybody, and they did really well. Considering how short a time frame they had to do this, the quick turnaround, it went extremely well. I have not heard a lot of negative about that. So it gives me a lot of hope for what Microsoft might be able to do with Build now that Build has been decided to be replaced with the virtual event. So that is May timeframe. We expect to hear more about that later. I've been doing some work over at IT Pro that I wanted to mention here, talking about remote working tips. I got to talk to the awesome Duck Sai. Many of you know him as Neat Ducks on Twitter. We talked about remote working tips for productivity. I wrote about the Microsoft Proficiency Proficiency Cloud certifications. They're making a shift to roles-based. But however, rather than retire at the end of June, the MCSA, MCSD, and MCSE, they have actually extended all those out. That retirement will not occur now until January 31st, 2020 or 2021. So they decided to hold off on that retirement because of what's going on with all the circumstances around the coronavirus. I wrote about work from home software companies and how they're innovating and expanding features as more and more people are working from home. And then I also have a link here to the story about the 6 more months of support for Windows 10 version 1709 that was due to go out of support, or this cycle. What else? Couple of posts I wanted to mention from Microsoft that I mentioned at the top of the show. One is a letter from Satya Nadella to all the Microsoft employees about how the company is coming together to combat COVID-19, the coronavirus. So he's got a lot of content in there, but the one I wanted to mention specifically because it has just a mind-boggling stat. This was posted yesterday, and it's talking about Microsoft Cloud Services continuity, and they share a number here. So since everything shifted to work from home remote scenarios, Microsoft Teams, Windows Virtual Desktop, Power BI, Xbox Live, right? More people at home, more people are able to spend time on Xbox Live as well. 775% increase of their cloud services in regions that have enforced social distancing or shelter-in-place orders. 775% increase. They've also seen a spike in Teams usage. They have more than 44 million daily users now, and those users are generating over 900 million meeting and calling minutes on Teams daily in a single week. And they got more data. Windows Virtual Desktop usage has gone up 3 times, and government use of Power BI to share COVID-19 dashboards has almost doubled. So tremendous amount of impact. And I got to tell you, yes, they've had a couple of outages, right? There's been some unavailability a couple odd times, but for the most part, they've powered right through this, right? The work they've done to build the infrastructure of Azure, which is everything is in Azure, right? Xbox Live, Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365, Office 365, OneDrive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That work in building that redundancy and those backup capabilities has really worked. And again, they've had a couple of hiccups, but that's it. They are not overwhelmed by it, as I saw in a headline from one blog post, and they are by far not overwhelmed by it. Is it challenging? Yes. Challenging and overwhelmed are 2 different things, okay? So they are definitely dealing with it. They've had the hiccups. It's going to happen. But for the most part, they've kept people up and running. So pretty impressive. You got to go read this stuff about the stats. It's just mind-boggling what they're doing, how they're approaching it for customers, focusing on first responders, highest level of monitoring first responders, emergency medical supply, applications for emergency response teams, health bots, health management apps, and things of that nature. Just absolutely laser focus on what they're doing to make sure people can do what they need to do. Other things around COVID-19 coronavirus that I wanted to mention. If you are looking to get information on this and what's going on, one of the most sincere and on-point voices I've heard is Dr. Tony Fauci. This is the guy that you've seen at some of the daily briefings from the White House. He's the director of the National Institute for Viral Disease Type Institute, right? So he's a very smart man, knows his business. I would listen to him over anybody when he talks about what's going on with coronavirus. And in fact, if you go to social media, you can find him having done a question and answer session with Stephen Curry, the basketball player, and Trevor Noah, the late night host, on social media. So you can go check that out. Another thing, Bill Gates, he was on CNN's coronavirus town hall 4 or 5 days ago. And absolutely most brilliant piece of insight and television around the coronavirus, and definitely a must listen. And as I say that, I got to tell you, go to Netflix if you have Netflix and look for Inside Bill's Brain. It is I think it's just a three-part. I think it's 3 or 4 parts, and a documentary about how Bill Gates learns, how he understands technology, how he just consumes and reads stuff like a fish swims in water. And it's a brilliant, insightful documentary, and it just leads you to understand that he thinks into things so far beyond what many of us do. It's just such an impressive thing. So I highly recommend the Netflix documentary on him. But go find, they got that posted on the CNN website, the interview he did with Anderson Cooper and Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and it was just a brilliant piece of television. And again, if you really want to understand, go to the sources that have authority in this, that have understanding in it, that have science on their side, okay? Try to stay away from the sensationalism and things like that occur. All right. I also wanted to mention, I got a link here to some COVID-19 scams that are going on. Of course, anytime there's a big emergency or a national disaster or natural disaster or anything in the world, the scammers will take advantage of that and try to get you to do things. I've heard stories of people dressed as doctors going house to house in neighborhoods saying that they are there to check your house for coronavirus, and then they're coming in and robbing the place, or they're casing the place to come back later and rob it. You've got the email scams, the phone scams. But there's this fella on this specific story, what I posted also is on there, a guy who went on YouTube and a phone call as a persona about this someone who was selling a quote-unquote cure for coronavirus. So definitely go check that out and be aware, right? Be aware that kind of stuff is happening. The other thing is marketing and emails for coronavirus, right? We've all heard from companies we've done business with and some companies we forgot we did business with that are talking about the coronavirus and their actions to deal with that, to support you as a customer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some people have complained about that. I don't have any heartburn with these businesses who I have done interactions with telling me what they're doing, right? That could very well influence my choice. If I've got to go out and do shopping for my family, it might influence my choice of where I go shop, okay? Because it adds a certain level of comfort and knowing that they're taking steps to be as safe as possible. The one thing I don't appreciate, and what I'm seeing a lot of, because I get a lot of marketing pitches, it is the pitches that are coming in tied to coronavirus. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of this stuff is legitimate and has a role there, but if everything you're pitching is because of coronavirus, due to coronavirus, you got to rethink your marketing, right? Let your product stand on its own legs and do its thing. If you have to tie it into the coronavirus thing, you're missing the mark, okay? So that's what I'll say about that. I wanted to mention there are so many resources, there's so many people working from home, kids are home from school, all those tools are being used for kids and around the house and stuff like that. There is a ton of resources that have been opened up. One, for instance, the Internet Archive, 1.4 million copyrighted books are available online for free that you can download to read on the web or read on a local device, read on a Kindle or something like that. Amazon Prime Video has opened up their free options in there. So if you're already a Prime customer, check in what's new on the free level because they have made a lot of stuff free that wasn't before. Same thing with Comcast, same thing Comcast/Xfinity, and I'm sure other cable companies have as well. The interesting thing about Comcast and Xfinity is they're now doing home releases, right? So a lot of movies have been canceled or their release dates have been pushed, but now we're starting to see there's a handful of movies that are being released to home market as well as in theaters, although I don't know who's going to theaters these days. Now they're a little expensive. I saw one for rent for $20. If you pay $10 a ticket for you and your spouse to go out and meal and everything else, it might be worth it. but there's lots of options there. Disney Plus have quickly ramped up their availability around the world. They've also released some of their new movies straight to Disney Plus, so you've got those access as well. So it's pretty neat to see how first-run movie releases have changed with all of this going on as well. Telehealth. Right? So this Tuesday, I'm going to go to my first doctor's appointment that's done via telehealth. I'm going to sit here in front of my computer. I'm going to connect with my doctor. I've done all the pre-work, tested my machine. It's a big deal. People are starting to use more telehealth. This was talked about a lot, has been used a lot, but I think the circumstances of wanting people to isolate and do social distancing has brought it to the forefront for routine medical care, right? My quarterly appointment with my doctor is pretty routine, right? We're monitoring my health, we're monitoring my prescriptions, and we kind of touch base on things and just keep things rolling that way. Well, I was a perfect candidate to test out telehealth with him. So I will be doing that on Tuesday. And of course, my next show, I'll talk about that experience. But telehealth's starting to become. And in fact, as you look at all these changes between movie releases online same day they hit theater potential, all this, the resources that are out there for people and stuff like that, working from home, the remote work, I think it's going to be changed forever, right? I think people who never worked from home or did remote work are going to be appreciative and understanding of what their current remote work and work from home workforce goes through and experiences. So I think it's going to provide some empathy for people who may have never experienced working from home. And there were a lot of people who were working from home for the first time when all this kind of came down a few weeks ago. So I think in that sense, it's changed that perspective. I think it's changed the approach. I think we will see more of it. I think companies are going to realize that there is real potential and productivity in people working from home, more people working from home and remote work. I think you're finding out right now that more things can be done from home and remote than you ever thought was possible. So that will lead into the possibility of jobs having the potential to be done via remote work. So it really is going to be, I think, a change that is going to continue on. Even when coronavirus resolves itself and is resolved, I think these changes that have happened are going to have a sustaining impact on our community, on the tech community going down the road. Cloud services have done pretty well, whether it's Microsoft, which we've already talked about, Google, AWS, all of them have stayed up pretty solid for the most part, right? I haven't seen a lot of raging about outages and things like that. Again, hiccups and outages are two different things, right? You have a brief outage or something like that, you're still well within things. They may be more apparent to us because we're right on top of them now because we're all working from home via the cloud. But for the most part, cloud services have sustained. The networks and the backups and the redundancies and the data centers have all been built to a point where they've been able to do what they needed to do. Have they hit those limits? They sure have. Have they had to ration services? A little bit. They're dropping back bandwidth. They're dropping back resolution. They may be offering things at a lower resolution to save some of that bandwidth, but they are doing things to be able to manage the system on a day-to-day basis to keep it up and functioning so people can still work. All right, so the other thing I wanted to mention was my source of information that I have chosen to use as my routine, and I'm all about using a single source. Once you find a trusted source, stick with that source, right? Because that is probably your most reliable source, at least for what you're seeing. For me, it's the Bing COVID-19 tracker. It's a live map. It's updated regularly. Not only does it have the tally about active cases globally and in all the different countries and in states and in counties here in the United States, but it also has charts to kind of show you the slope of the number of cases and things of that nature, but then links to news stories related to what's going on currently around the COVID-19 coronavirus stuff. So that, for me, is the main resource I use. And in fact, I share a lot of that through my Twitter account as I'm reviewing it. All right, so that's kind of the wrap on the tech stuff and the coronavirus stuff, COVID-19. Lots of sources out there. Just be careful out there, right? Be smart, be savvy. On the space front, right? There are still a few space launches going on. SpaceX launched a Starlink mission back on the 18th of March, about 11 days ago, very successfully. It's like their 5th or 6th Starlink mission, I think. SpaceX also won a contract with NASA to deliver cargo to the Gateway space station that will be in orbit around the moon when they finally get out there for Artemis and all that kind of stuff. And of course, you understand that whole process. The moon's kind of the stopping point before Mars. But SpaceX has been contracted now to deliver cargo out there. And that will happen via SpaceX's Dragon cargo spacecraft or potentially their manned spacecraft because it can carry cargo as well. And then SpaceX is still doing stuff with their starships down in Boca Chica, Texas, and they're building up some serious starship stuff, and the work is getting better and better and better. They're doing some engine testing. They're doing some pressure testing of the tanks that they're building for these things. So if you're tracking on social media, you can track about Starship very easily there. On the NASA front, the Perseverance Mars rover, which is heading to Mars later this year, this summer, July timeframe, I think it's launching from Cape Canaveral. It will launch on a United Launch Alliance Atlas V, I think it is. It's heading out, but they just put 10.9 million names on it on a plaque. They are engraved by like electron laser on small silicon chips. My name's on there, my wife's name's on there, maybe even many of your names are on there. I hope you had a chance to get your name there. I think this will be like the third or fourth time my name and my wife's name will end up on Mars on a on an exploration vehicle. It's kind of cool. But so that's going on. We had some really. I want to mention two other NASA things. Orion spacecraft is back at the Orion spacecraft is back at Kennedy Space Center, undergoing launch preparations. I do not know when that Orion spacecraft is scheduled to be launched. I don't have all the details, but it is back at Kennedy in its launch preparation work. So it's just finished being tested along with Artemis. So Artemis finished its spacecraft environmental testing. So they do that up in Ohio, and they put it in this great big huge thing where they can drop the pressure and the temperature to test space-like condition. So it allows them to observe the spacecraft and see how it handles those extremes. So those two things have happened. The one sad piece of news from NASA in the last couple of weeks is the death of Al Worden, right? He was the command module pilot of Apollo 15. In fact, next year, I think, would have been the 50th anniversary of his space flight, because we're kind of walking our way through we're about to go on Apollo 13, right? So the 50th anniversary of Apollo 13 is coming up very soon. He was on Apollo 15 2 missions later, so that's sometime early next year. It would have been the 50th anniversary. But unfortunately, he passed away about 10 days ago, age 88. Not related to coronavirus. It was just natural causes with his family, all that kind of stuff. But I got a great story about Al Worden, and that day that I found out the news, I shared a picture on my Twitter account, and you can go back and see it, of me standing next to him at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. He was doing the astronaut talk one of the days that we were there. And so I stood in line for an opportunity to go up and talk to him, shake his hand, and meet him. And my wife snapped that picture of us with my cell phone. But I got to share the story. So this story goes back to my dad, right, would have been the mid-70s time frame. And one of Al Worden's crewmates on that mission on Apollo 15 was Apollo 15. I got to look this. Oh, James Irwin. James Irwin, right? So James Irwin was one of the crew members who landed and walked on the moon on Apollo 15. Al Worden was command module pilot, so he was in orbit. And then David Scott was the commander, and he was down on the moon as well. So my dad, as a cook and a baker in the mid-70s in Florida, met James Irwin. James Irwin created the High Flight organization after his moon. After he went to the moon, he was so moved spiritually by his experience of that space flight and being on the moon that he came back and started this High Flight organization. And so my dad worked an event at a hotel, and James Irwin was one of the speakers. So my dad got autographed pictures of James Irwin standing on the moon next to the U.S. flag in the Apollo vehicle, the limb, and all of us kids got this. I have no idea where it is today. It's probably in the back of a photo frame in some house somewhere. I wish I could find it, but unfortunately it's lost to the ages. But so that was pretty cool. Had that hanging up in my room, and I, after boot camp, and just lost track of it at some point in life. But a really cool thing, kind of connection. So when I had the opportunity to meet Al Worden at NASA, he was an Air Force guy, I shared that story about James Irwin, and he shared some insight about the trip and the journey, and James Irwin and David Scott, the crew of Apollo 15. It was just a terrific opportunity. You know, it was a split second in time for this man who had done so much, but I was very appreciative that he took a moment to spend time, one, listening to this guy just tell a story, and connecting those dots. And so it was really a tremendous opportunity. I'm glad I got to do that. That's been quite a while now. That's probably been 11 or 12 years since I met Al Worden there at Kennedy Space Center. But may he rest in peace. And we are slowly, that's another one of our moonwalkers we've lost. And we are slowly, unfortunately, losing that generation of guys that did such things on the top of a very powerful rocket. On the United Launch Alliance front, they successfully launched the first national security space mission for the U.S. Space Force. They launched an AEHF, that is a high-frequency satellite, up into geosynchronous orbit, somewhere in the ballpark of 230,000 miles above the surface of the Earth. So they did that launch last week. Got a brief glimpse of it from here in Northeast Florida. And then miscellaneous stuff in space, there's a company called OneWeb that just launched a batch of satellites last week on a Soyuz vehicle. Unfortunately has had to file bankruptcy with all the stuff going on in the world. So they're filing bankruptcy in order to reorganize and stay solvent, but we'll see how that works out. And then in all the midst of all this craziness going on Earth, there are astronauts up in space, and they continue to share beautiful, inspiring photos of the Earth. And letting us know about perspective, right? We can get very tied in and very focused, and we should at times. We should be very focused on our existence and who we are and who we are around and things like that. But it really is an opportunity to see the world without borders. So I think that's very important. And I got a link here to go see all that. And of course, I have links to all this stuff I talk about in the show. You just have to go to winobs.com and find the show links there. One other thing that I'll mention here is Star Trek Picard. The season finale was released this Thursday, available for viewing. I actually saved the last 2 episodes. It was absolutely mind-shattering, jaw-dropping, etc., etc., etc. Go see it. Go watch it. CBS All Access is offering a free month right now that you can go sign up, and you can binge all 10 episodes of Star Trek Picard to check out this first season. Closing, what can we talk about? Let me just wrap up with a few different things. First off, we are involved in the midst of a historical and global event. This is an event on the scale of 9/11. When Kennedy was assassinated, Martin Luther King was assassinated, Robert Kennedy was assassinated, World War II, World War I. I mean, even back to the Spanish flu. We're hearing stories about people who survived Spanish flu are surviving this coronavirus. So this is one of those events that we're always going to remember the who, what, where, when, and why. Where were we and what was going on with us? It is having that kind of an impact. Technology is impacting the quarantine process. Imagine if this had occurred 15 years ago in 2005. You wouldn't have social media. You wouldn't have streaming services. You wouldn't have delivery services for your grocery or for food. We would not have the work from home infrastructure, the remote working infrastructure. There would be so many things. You'd be hoping you could get a VHS, sneaking out to oh my gosh, I'm drawing a total blank on the video rental place. But the Blue Place, oh my God, I can't remember. Anyway, you know what I mean. Going out to rent your VHS tapes because you can't do streaming. There was no such thing. So it would be a very different experience, wouldn't it? So it's horrible that we're going through, but we are. And the tools we have now, the technology we have now is making a significant impact on the lockdown, on the stay in place orders, because it's given us resources to be able to continue on staying connected to the world in a way that we never could have done before. I'm noticing also new litter is out in the world, right? When you pull into a retail parking lot, disinfecting wipes, gloves. People are taking them off and leaving them in the carts. They're leaving them on the side of the road, on the parking lot, in the weed. You know what? Do like they say when you camp out. Pack out your trash and take it with you. Have a bag. Prepare for this, right? Have a bag in your car. Seal that stuff in the bag and then throw the bag away when you get home. Don't let it just blow across the parking lot. Community. Remember back post 9/11, community was such a big deal, right? Community kind of reinvigorated. Well, we're seeing that happen now with coronavirus. Music from balconies in countries all over the world. We're seeing clapping and cheering for healthcare workers from windows all over the world. We're recognizing real heroes in this fight. Doctors, nurses, hospital workers, grocery store clerks, restaurant staff for on-the-go and to-go orders and carry-out. There is a group of people here that are being that work very challenging situations and circumstances, and they don't always get properly rewarded for it or recognized for it. Well, that's starting to happen, kind of like post 9/11 with first responders. And so we need to keep that. That community needs to be sustained. Will it be sustained? I'm not sure. It should be. Be kind and considerate to one another and lend a helping hand all the time. It shouldn't just show itself during a crisis, but unfortunately it's usually a crisis that brings that out in people. So to rephrase that, it is there all the time. It's just not as apparent. And I'm not saying don't do it for the attention. Do it because it's the basic human thing, okay? So as I wrap up, I want you to take care, stay safe, and stay healthy wherever you are in the world. Know that This is something that will pass. We will work our way through it. It has to work its course. It has to go through it. We have to do the proactive things to be safe, be conscious about who we are, where we are, and what we're doing. If they were told to stay put, stay put. Don't go out there and do things you shouldn't be doing. It's just not going to work out that way. Okay. So until next time we connect, blessings to all of you. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Take care. Catch you on the next episode of Faith, Tech, and Space.